My name is Kathy Harkey, and I am a mother who lost her son to suicide. It happened a little over 4 years ago on January 8th, 2006. There were many signs that I should have seen as a mother that I did not see. So I'm going to introduce you to my son, and I would like for you to think about some of the signs that I could have identified when he was living. My son's name was Joshua. He loved to ride motorcycles. He raced motorcycles. He was very outdoorsy. He had 2 horses, Julep and Abby, both Appaloosas. He loved to ride horses. Had a black lab, loved his dog, many, many friends. And our house was the hangout. You know, the guys were always at our house, and I always felt okay with that because I thought, at least I know what they're doing, at least I know they're safe. And I was always the kind of mother to where if one of my children, I have 2 other sons as well, Joshua was my oldest, the type of mother, if one of my children were to become sick, right away I panicked, took him to the doctor. Well, Joshua graduated from high school, and the men in my family are Navy men, and he decided to follow in their footsteps, so he enlisted in the Navy. He came home from the Navy, and he was not the same. He was very depressed. His friends were excited that he was back. They were coming over to visit. He didn't act the same around them. He didn't encourage the visits, and like I said, he was just kind of like a outdoorsy, all guys guy, and had lots of friends. So the friends started trickling away and didn't come over as often. He didn't ride his motorcycle anymore, which was something that he always loved to do. He stopped taking care of the horses like he did. He would go down and feed them and things like that, but he just didn't spend the time with them that he at one time did. He stopped eating. He isolated himself in his room. He lost a lot of weight, and we're talking a good-sized guy. He was around 6 foot, well-built. He had been in the service, had a nice girlfriend. They had corresponded before when he went into the Navy. They were still corresponding. When he came home, he even put distance between himself and her. And so he basically isolated himself from the world, and he got real sad, and he wouldn't have a lot to do with his family anymore. As his mother, you know, at first I thought this was something that he needed to just kick himself out of and perk up a little bit and change whatever might need to be changed. But it doesn't work that way. I knew absolutely nothing about suicide, didn't even realize that it was a threat. And so, you know, you can't just tell your child or someone that you know that is suffering depression, sadness, types of feelings like I've just described, hey, pick yourself up, get out of it, let's go on a vacation, maybe that'll kick you out of this and you'll become the way you were before. It does not work that way. When they become so depressed and they develop those hopeless and helpless feelings, it takes a great deal to pull them out of it, but the signs that I just told you about, the flat expression, the not eating, his sleeping pattern changed, the not being interested in things that he used to be interested in, such as dirt bike riding and his horses, hanging out with his friends, playing football. He loved to play football. We live in the country, so we have a fair amount of land, and it was in our front field that the football games all occurred. I even look out my window now sometimes, especially in the morning when I'm drinking my coffee, and I can visualize them out there in that front field playing football. But when somebody gets depressed like that and feels so discouraged, they can't just kick themselves out of it. They need help. But in order to get that help, a lot of times you'll hear about people who are depressed, who lay in bed, they can't get out of bed, they can't do this or that for themselves. So in order to get the help, a lot of times they need friends, family members, someone who is around them or sees them and maybe recognizes some of these signs to step in and help them. When they become that bleak in their situation, it's just too much for them to make a phone call, too much for them to even move and seek out help. And often they feel like the help's not going to do any good. They're at that hopeless stage. But if you recognize signs in someone that you see as just sad and you think may be contemplating suicide, they don't have to talk about it. My son never mentioned a word. If you recognize any of those signs, you need to talk to them about it. You know, it's something I've thought a lot about, and I thought, well, you know, if I talk about it, it might put the thought in their head. That is not true. That is a total myth. They're already thinking about that if they feel that hopeless and helpless. So talk to them about it. Encourage them to get help. There are so many wonderful medicines and behavioral cognitive therapies out there right now, all types of things that can help someone that sinks into that deep of a depression. And you'll probably hear statistics tonight, but 1 in every 4 people is affected by a mental illness, and 90% of those or 90% of all people who commit suicide have a treatable mental illness. So with 1 in 4 people affected, you are bound to run across somebody in your lifetime who is suffering some of the symptoms that I've just described. So please pay close attention for those symptoms. And when people talk about suicide, another thing, and I didn't understand this until it happened to me, is that when people mention suicide and say, I'm going to take my life, I was always told if somebody says it over and over and over, those are the people that probably won't do it. It's the ones who do not talk about it who commit suicide. That's another complete myth. If somebody talks about suicide and that thought is in their mind, there's a very real possibility that they are considering committing suicide. And it's such a waste. A friend of mine says constantly, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, which is so true. If the person that is that sad and depressed gets help, more than likely he or she will come out of that depression and sadness. I missed a lot of signs as a mother because I was not educated. I knew absolutely nothing about suicide, didn't even know it was a risk. Thought my son could pull himself up, you know, from the tail of his pants and get it together and get over these depressed feelings that he was having. But it did not happen. And on January 8th of 2006, 24 years old, he had come home from the Navy and he shot himself. And we found him the next morning. He was over on the side of the field, an old playhouse that he had built with some friends of his when he was 11 or 12. And he was there. And, you know, there was still an old Tonka truck sitting out by where he died. You know, and I think about this, and I just think what a total waste of life, because he did not have to die. He was only 24 years old, and he had a lot going for him, but he was in deep pain, and he was in a pain like I have never hurt so bad as I hurt when I lost him, and even still hurt to this day. But the pain that he was in was so much greater, a pain such as I cannot imagine. But as friends, family members, people who may just be casual acquaintance of someone that talks about it or you see as sad, if you notice that, just have a discussion and try to probe and find out what's going on, because this is a serious issue, but it does not have to lead to death. If you have any questions, I'll be here at the end, and I thank you for your time.